thank you so much again for joining me on this channel. As always, I'm very grateful for all your previous views, likes, subscriptions and shares. I thought for today we'd spend some time looking at Lent, which is a significant moment in the Christian calendar. What it does is it builds up to Easter. And Easter, of course, is the festival where Christians acknowledge, celebrate the resurrection of Jesus after his death on the cross. And it's important to Christians because they believe that as the Son of God, Jesus sacrificed himself for the forgiveness of sins in the world and shows that he conquered death through his resurrection. Now, Easter is dictated in the calendar by the lunar calendar. That is the phases of the moon, which is why Easter is at a slightly different time each year, and therefore why Lent is at a slightly different time each year. But it normally is roughly at the same time as spring. And that's why I can associate it with new beginnings and new starts. So to find out about some of the origins of Lent, as always, I did my favourite trick on Google, which is I went to define a word. And first of all, I discovered that its origins are in the German and the Old English. And it literally means a long time, a long period of time, which makes sense because Lent lasts for 40 days. But we need to understand it in a little bit more detail. So I went to the Bible and looked at one of the Gospels, and I looked at the Gospel of Mark. And Mark gives us this 3-line explanation of Jesus in the desert for 40 days. And immediately the Spirit brought him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness for 40 days before being tempted by Satan. And he was with the wild animals, and the angels were serving him. Now, if this was a piece of homework and handed in to his teacher, I think the teacher may well say to Mark, well, yes, you have given me a summary of Jesus in the desert and you have told me some of the key points, but I think really you need to write in a lot more detail and extend your written answers. Maybe their teacher would point them towards this movie called The Last Days in the Desert, starring Ewan McGregor of Obi-Wan Kenobi fame. From 2015. Or even better, maybe the teacher would say, why don't you have a look at Matthew's Gospel? Because actually I think you'll find there's a lot more detail in there. So that's what we will do. We will have a look at Matthew's Gospel to find out what happened when Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. Remember, he's had 40 days in there and he's not been eating. He's been fasting. And the tempter, that's how Matthew describes Satan, the devil, comes up to him and says, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. And Jesus answered with, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. So there's a couple of things that I think it's worth drawing our attention to. First of all, bread at that time in the Middle East, and still in many cultures, okay, is your basic food stuff. We are so used to going to the supermarket shelves and seeing all types of bread, whether it's giraffe bread or tiger bread, rye bread, gluten-free bread, pita bread, wheat-free bread, and everything else in between. But bread is your basic carbohydrates. It's, the main source of energy, as it were. And here's the devil saying to Jesus, well, you're hungry. Why don't you turn those stones into nice pieces of bread? Well, I think what's interesting is how Jesus responds with man that cannot live on bread alone, but everything that comes from the word of God. And for our first thing to be thinking about, well, what can a Christian take from this response? Well, it's interesting, isn't it, how Jesus basically says that God's books are food for the soul. Okay, so a Christian could take from this, well, maybe actually it's a reminder of how important the written word is, the teachings of God are in my day-to-day life. Okay, so I think that's the first thing that we can take from this in terms of what a Christian may learn from this account in the Gospels. Now, the story continues because then the devil took him, that's Jesus, to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. And he says to Jesus, if you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that they will not strike your foot against a stone. Jesus answered him, it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. So again, Jesus is referring back to Holy Scriptures. Now, of course, at that time, okay, Jesus wasn't quoting from the New Testament. He was quoting from the Jewish holy book, the Tanakh. And of course, it's the Tanakh which Christians have part of their holy book, the Bible, and they refer to as the Old Testament. But isn't it interesting, yet again, how we have this power of words and the power of the written word? And every time Jesus is given a quote by the devil, he bats it back with a quote from the Bible. And it keeps going, because for the third time, and again, isn't it interesting how the number 3 is a significant number in the Bible, and maybe that's another video I should be doing. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Yet again, the devil tries to tempt Jesus, to tempt him to do something. But there's a few things that really draw me in here. So, first of all, Jesus is taken up a mountain by the devil. And mountains were very important. Mountains were a physical symbol of being closer to God. And I was thinking about how you have the story of Moses. When he's receiving the 10 Commandments, he goes up a mountain to get closer to God and to receive those tablets. But when he comes down, he notices that the Israelites, who were a bit bored and wondering what was going on, decided to make a god out of gold, a nice golden calf to worship. Not surprisingly, Moses wasn't best pleased. And it's almost as though Matthew, who's writing this gospel, is saying, well, look, mountains are there to be closer to God, not to be closer to the devil. They're there as a place where you can reflect quietly. And it's also a reminder to readers that actually there is only one God to be worshipped. But I think the other thing to build on this is that, well, you have Jesus in the desert for 40 days. But why do Christians acknowledge Lent? Why is it that they acknowledge this for 40 days? Well, I think one reason is empathy. And empathy is a very powerful tool, isn't it? If you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel how they pinch, that can really give you a good insight. But also the other aspect as well is help to be closer to God. Now, that is not an exhaustive list, and I urge you just do your own research, have a little look round, a little think and a ponder. Okay, why do Christians acknowledge Lent? I'm fairly sure you can come up with some better thoughts than I have. Now, we need to think about how this impacts in modern society. Well, although it doesn't actually say in the Bible explicitly that Christians should be like Jesus in the sense of wandering around in the wilderness for 40 days, it's become part of Christian culture. And the day before Lent is known as Shrove Tuesday, okay, sometimes known as Pancake Day, hence the picture of the pancakes. And Shrove means forgiven for things you have done. So it's a time for Christians to be thinking about things they have done wrong and to start thinking about how Jesus prepared for himself in the desert. And Pancake Day came about because it was a way of Christians getting ready to fast. Okay, so all the good stuff in the house, all the good, really fatty, good foods would be used up, okay, to make sure the cupboards were clear so they could focus for a time, I suppose, of austerity, a time of leading a simple life. Now, Christians today may recognise this in a number of ways. So they might give up chocolate, which is quite a standard thing. Some Christians might give up meat as well, which might be seen as a luxury. But there's other ways of doing it too. I read about one account of Christians being encouraged to, through those 40 days of Lent, to get rid of something each day. Okay, maybe just throw it away or give it to a charity shop. The idea being is to let go of material objects. I've just read as well how lame this image is, because actually, if I'd done these things properly, rather than having the number 23 on the bins, we could have had the number 40 to symbolise the 40 days in Lent. But there we go. So, now, you may have heard of another name for Shrove Tuesday, as well as Pancake Day, which is something called Mardi Gras, which is literally translates as Fat Tuesday. And in some parts of the world, this is acknowledged with a huge carnival, a huge celebration. Okay, and Mardi Gras, in particular, in the French ethnic parts of the United States of America, have become huge occasions with singing and dancing and festivities, people dressing up wildly. really a time of celebration, because there's going to be 40 days of not celebrating, 40 days of hardship, 40 days of being somber and being reflective. And of course, the day after Shrove Tuesday is known as Ash Wednesday. It is the first day of Lent, Ash Wednesday. And many Christians in many denominations will go to church and they will have a cross in ash marked on their forehead. And they will say words such as repent and believe in the gospel, or remember that you are dust and to dust you shall return. That, of course, is a reference to how humanity was created out of the dust and the soil of the ground by God in creation. Again, that is a time for reflection and to being somber. So, before we conclude, I think it's worth just thinking about this. How has Lent become part of everyday life? I love it when religion just seeps into every pore of our lifestyles. Many people take part in Lent and they're not even Christian. Okay, so they may give up something for Lent. They may take something up for Lent. Sort of almost like a New Year's resolution, but it's a focused period for those 40 days. And just in your own studies, have a look around and see other examples that you can find of people taking up Lent. Anyway, I just want to thank you so much again for watching. Thank you so much for your support. And as always, enjoy your learning.